that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
The excitement of Jewish apologists and the fragility of biblical historicity, a critical examination by Dr. Ray Taylor. The debate surrounding the messianic prophecies of the Hebrew Bible has long been a source of contention between Jewish and Christian scholars. Figures such as Rabbi Tovia Singer take great pride in arguing that Jewish texts do not support Christian claims about Jesus as the Messiah. However, such debates often ignore a more fundamental issue: the historical validity of the Hebrew Bible itself. This paper explores how Jewish apologetics, particularly the excitement of figures like Singer, is ultimately undermined by modern archaeology, which increasingly demonstrates that the foundational biblical figures such as Moses and David were either mythological or vastly different from their biblical portrayals. The entire Old Testament, rather than being a historical record, emerges as a collection of political and theological fables constructed to serve ideological purposes. The Passion of Jewish Apologetics, Rabbi Tovia Singer and the Messianic Debate. Rabbi Tovia Singer is one of the most well-known voices in counter-missionary apologetics, actively engaging in refutations of Christian claims that Jewish scriptures prophesies Jesus as the Messiah. He meticulously examines passages such as Isaiah 53, Daniel 9, and Psalms 22, arguing that Christian interpretations distort their original meanings. His enthusiasm is defending Jewish scripture against Christian reinterpretation is indicative of a larger phenomenon: the belief that the Hebrew Bible possesses an intrinsic, authoritative, historical, and theological foundation. However, this zeal overlooks the increasing body of archaeological and historical scholarship that challenges the very authenticity of the biblical narrative. Archaeology and the myth of Moses. The figure of Moses is foundational to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. However, no archaeological evidence supports the existence of Moses or the events of Exodus. No Egyptian records mention Moses or the mass departure of Hebrew slaves, an event that would have been catastrophic for Egypt's economy and military strength. The lack of any physical evidence of a 40-year sojourn in the Sinai desert, despite extensive archaeological surveys, suggests that the Exodus never occurred. The biblical narrative of Moses closely parallels earlier Mesopotamian myths, particularly the story of Sargon of Akkad, suggesting that his story was a later literary invention rather than a historical figure. If Moses did exist, then the Torah, if Moses didn't exist, the Torah, the very foundation of Jewish religious and legal identity, loses its historical credibility. The theological implications of this are immense, as Jewish apologetics, such as those of Rabbi Singer, depend on the assumption that the Torah is divinely revealed and historically grounded. King David, a mythologized tribal leader. Unlike Moses, David has at least some indirect archaeological support, but not in the way the Bible portrays him. The Tel Dan stele, 9th century BCE, contains a reference to the House of David, which suggests the existence of a historical Davidic dynasty. However, there is no evidence that David ruled a vast united monarchy as described in the Bible. Excavations of Jerusalem from the supposed time of David reveal no evidence of a grand capital city. The Jerusalem of David's era was a small, insignificant highland settlement. There are no contemporary inscriptions or monumental buildings that indicate David ruled an empire stretching from Egypt to the Euphrates. Many scholars argue that David was likely a local chieftain whose legend was later embellished by biblical authors for theological and political purposes. If David was not a great king, then the Bible account of Israel's golden age under David and Solomon collapses. This further erodes the credibility of Jewish and Christian claims that the Hebrew Bible provides an accurate historical record. The Old Testament as political and theological fiction. The Hebrew Bible was not written as an historical document, but as a theological and political text designed to unify disparate Israelite tribes under a common national and religious identity. Key elements of this fabrication include the patriarchal narratives, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. No historical evidence supports their existence, and they appear to be later literary creations meant to establish divine legitimacy for all Israelite claims to the land. The conquest of Canaan. The archaeological record contradicts the biblical account of a swift and violent conquest. Instead, the rise of Israelite identity appears to have been gradual cultural evolution among Canaanite populations. The prophetic books. These texts serve as ideological tools to reinforce monotheism and obedience to the priestly elite rather than objective historical records. The irony of Jewish apologetics in the light of historical reality. Rabbi Tovia Singer and others engage in passionate defense of a scriptural tradition that is in reality a later political and theological construction. The irony is that while they refute Christian misuse of Jewish scripture, they fail to recognize the very scriptures they defend are themselves mythological. If archaeologists continue to dismantle the historical basis of the Hebrew Bible, what happens to Jewish apologetics? How will they respond when the broader public realizes that Moses never led an exodus, David never ruled a kingdom, and the Torah is a collection of later literary fabrications? The need for a new perspective. The debate between Jewish and Christian scholars over the interpretation of the Hebrew Bible are ultimately distractions from a more fundamental issue. The Bible is not a historical document, but a mythological and political construct. As archaeological and historical research continues to erode the factual foundation of the biblical narrative, those who invest their identities in these texts, whether Jewish, Christian, or otherwise, will be forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. The future of biblical studies must move beyond apologetics and embrace a critical, evidence-based approach that acknowledges the Hebrew Bible as a collection of fables rather than a divinely inspired history. Jewish Messiah myths. Some rabbis, such as Tovia Singer, become animated when debating whether Jewish passages support or refute Jesus of Nazareth as a Messiah. This fervor raises an important question. How would these individuals react when confronted with the growing body of archaeological evidence that challenges the very existence of Moses and David? The reality is that Moses never existed, and David was not a great king at all. The entire Old Testament is a collection of fables, literary constructs, rather than historical record. I'm not writing this to be falsely accused of anti-Semitism. Rather, I'm addressing the issue because there is a glaring lack of pushback on platforms such as YouTube. Many channels either fear the backlash of speaking the truth or worry about being labeled anti-Semitic. However, the truth must be stated clearly. My references include Israeli archaeologists such as Israel Finkelstein and Neil Asher Silberman, who have thoroughly examined the historical and archaeological record. Their findings show that the Torah is not a divinely inspired document of history, but a collection of myths written for political and religious purposes. Rabbi Singer and others may argue that Judaism is a reliable religion and that the Torah is factual, but in reality, it is another fabricated belief system, no different from countless other mythologies. Thank you for engaging with this discussion. Please subscribe for more content that challenges the status quo and seeks the truth. And always remember to be wise as a serpent.